Hello, welcome to a Gamasutra video interview. Today I'm talking to Phil Tibitoski about Octodad, the Dadliest Catch. So you can just see him just going over there. And the idea is that, as per usual, he's going to essentially talk about the game while you can see me playing it for a bit of a visual aid. So I guess probably what we should start with is if you could give a sort of basic outline about what the game's about, just for the people who don't really know.
Yeah, sure. So in Octodad, you play as an octopus, and you have this human family that have no idea that you're an octopus. And the whole point of the game is to kind of complete these mundane chores or overcome these seemingly normal challenges, like taking care of your kids or mowing the lawn or going to the grocery store and things like that. But it's hard to do because you control each of his limbs independently, and he has no bones, and you flop around and kind of destroy your environment. It's all about like managing his movement. And that's like the main puzzle of the game.
Yeah. So for people watching, I'm essentially right now using the analog stick to remove cushions and open cabinets, and the whole place is falling down, which is obviously excellent. So yeah, it's originally the game was a student game that came out in 2010. I mean, so now that you've sort of built it into this full game, what exactly was the point when you decided that you were going to do that? Was that always the plan, or was it the sort of the way that people responded to the original demo?
I mean, it had a lot to do with how people responded, because we weren't sure whether or not people were going to like it at all. We didn't really show it to that many people before we put it out online for free. But once we did kind of get that response of everybody at least enjoying it in some way, we were like, oh, cool, maybe we can make this a full thing, because the first game we made in like 5 months or so, and that original team was about 18 people, and it wasn't necessarily the best we thought we could do. It was just what we could do within that amount of time. And the whole point was to enter the Independent Games Festival and see if we could do something in the student competition. And so once that did well and kind of started rolling, starting with indie games and moving on to a bunch of other press outlets and players, we were like, okay, we can make a real thing out of this, and I think it's something that people would actually want or be willing to pay money for, and maybe we could keep making games after that.
Yeah. And I mean, like, so when it has come to making this full build, has it been difficult? Because I guess with the original one, a lot of people have played it and thought, oh, this is hilarious, this is really funny, but also thought, but it's also, sort of like a bit of a gimmick, really. I mean,
right.
How has it been difficult to break out away, from that, the idea of it just being based around a gimmick?
A little bit. I mean, so there was a lot of stuff that we wanted to fix in a way, because some of the problems with the first game were not in any way intentional, but we definitely wanted to keep with it being like an awkward, funny, weird experience, and we wanted to keep the controls in the same kind of way we had them in the first game. We just wanted to kind of clean it up a little bit and get rid of the frustration that we didn't intend to have in the game, and make it a little bit more smooth and intuitive, but still have the game be about that, like, trying to manage his physical movement while doing these things that are usually seen as simple. And I mean, creating a like 4-hour experience out of what was previously maybe a half an hour has been interesting, and actually has led us astray a few times, because we ended up going into like creating these levels that were a little too gamey for Octodad, getting into sort of like platformer territory sometimes.
Oh wow!
And we had to kind of like reel ourselves back and be like, no, the game is about these like mundane situations and putting them into these and making that funny.
Yeah.
And I think we did a pretty good job of pulling back on that.
So were there any sort of telltale signs that you then began watching out for, when you did get to those points where you thought, okay, maybe this is going into territory that we should possibly sort of dodge around, really?
Well, I think it was really easy to want to make spaces that were more exciting than their real life counterparts. So, like in the aquarium sometimes, which is like a pretty big section of the game, a lot of the exhibits might start to get a little large and unrealistic, and just like, I don't know, we just ran into a lot of trouble with people playing the game and it being way too hard, and things like that.
Yeah, cause I was gonna say actually, because like after I played this build, I remember the original, be like laughing a lot at it, and also thinking like, this is really really hard to control. And while the new version still feels pretty difficult to sort of it's hilariously sort of all over the place, it does feel like I can actually sort of play it a lot more, if you know what I mean, this time around.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing, is because like in the first game it had a story, but you were usually so kind of worked up in moving him around that you didn't get to necessarily enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
And in this one, we wanted to make it so that we could tell this full-on story and get that across to people, because that's a part of the game that we think is really important that I don't think we got to accentuate as much with the first game.
Yeah. And as well, do you feel like, because since sort of Octodad, and around that time as well, there was, I guess there was Quap, and there was EnviroBear, things like that. Do you feel like this sort of genre of games that are just have ridiculous controls and are really difficult to control and all over the place, do you feel like this is actually starting to become a genre now? Because I guess we've sort of had like Surgeon Simulator recently, which was a lot like this. I mean, I guess that would be sort of pretty cool if you were sort of, one of the first notable ones, really.
I think it's definitely getting there. I mean, Surgeon Simulator in particular has gotten pretty popular, and there are a lot of people who don't play games at all who know what Quap is, and I think that's really cool. I think one thing though with us is we tried to move away from it being just a frustrating like toy sort of thing, and more into like covering that up with like the charm of the character and having a lengthy story and stuff like that. And I think that's how we always saw the Octodad universe being, and just we weren't able to really pull that off with the first game in the way we wanted to.
Yeah, because I mean, like from what I've played, I really like the sort of the bits where he's with his family. Like so what I'm doing right now is I'm sort of lying in bed and being told to go to the kitchen, and in a second I'm going to be sort of interacting with the family. I've been finding all that kind of stuff fascinating. Like the sort of idea that essentially nobody. I guess I don't really get it as well. Nobody. How is it that nobody understands that he's an octopus? What is this? Is this sort of part of the story later on?
Kind of. I mean, we touch on that kind of stuff, but also when coming up with the idea, we just decided that we were going to agree upon this, that this was a thing that no one knows, and we didn't really need any explanation within the team. We were like, okay, cool, and we just kind of moved on and went with it. But we definitely, there's turmoil in the game later on, and more so than I think people will expect.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for people to find that out and play through.
Yeah. I mean, so if with sort of this, I guess, genre of game, it doesn't really have a name yet, though, does it? I feel like the genre needs a name.
Right. I mean, I've heard Quap likes and Awkward likes and stuff like that, but I don't think anyone has like coined a term that is definite yet.
I think the person who manages it will make $1 million. So I mean, if there's other studios then who are looking at games like Octodad and they're thinking, I guess we'd quite like to sort of mess around with making crazy games like this. Are there any things that you now, when you look back, you think I really sort of wish that I knew about that when we first started? Sort of tips for people who are going to make games with crazy controls like this.
Oh man.
Putting you on the spot a bit there.
Well, I mean, part of it is that people perceive the game as difficult or as frustrating, which I don't really like. But I like to think of it as just being very different than what you're used to.
Yeah.
Because, you go into a first-person shooter, and if you've ever played a first-person shooter before, you have a pretty good idea of how to play this one. Or at least get started, whereas with our game, you're kind of thrown into the deep end with something you've probably never done before as far as controlling a character in a game goes, and so we kind of have to teach you from scratch and box you into that first part of the first level and be like, you're not getting out of this room until you know what you're doing to some extent. But once you've got it going, we hear from a lot of people that, oh, this is actually pretty intuitive. I'm surprised that I'm like controlling it as well as I am, and things like that. People often surprise themselves with how quickly they learn how to move them around.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just be prepared for that sort of backlash initially, of people being like, this is impossible. Why would you do something like this purposely?
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like we've kind of worked through it, and since then it's, to our surprise, gotten much larger than we thought it ever would.
Yeah. I guess part of the appeal, like with Octodad and then with other games as well, like with QWOP, it's the idea of taking very sort of things that are simple. So right now I'm just grilling some burgers, which I don't think I have ever grilled burgers in a game ever before. But it's this idea that like you take something this simple and put ridiculous controls on it, and then suddenly it's hilarious. I mean, I guess for me that's like the appealing, the bits where it's real life but messed around with are the bits that are the kind of the most fun, really.
Right. Well, I mean, that was the initial spark of it. It was part of the initial spark was micromanaging those movements and like things you take for granted as being really simple and easy, and making them these kind of puzzles.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, sort of later into the game, because I guess up to now, like from what I've played, a lot of it is, as I was describing, sort of an octopus trying to deal with real life. I mean, is that how the game progresses, or does it sort of arc off in different directions later on?
I mean, for the most part, so you make your way to a grocery store and then eventually to an aquarium, and an aquarium is kind of where a lot of the conflict in the game takes place. And I can't say much more than that, but it's definitely always dealing with like real life issues and problems.
Yeah, I'm assuming an aquarium is the sort of place that an octopus pretending to be a human probably doesn't really want to be.
Yeah. It's pretty much the one place in the world he never wants to go.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think that I've shown off enough of this game for people to get a feel for what it's going to be about. So it's early 2014, right?
Yeah, right now we're shooting for January on Steam for PC, Mac, and Linux, and then shortly after that, maybe February, March, we're looking at for PS4.
Excellent. Right, well, I know that I'm looking forward to this.
No, thanks.
Because what I've played has been absolutely hilarious. Because the original demo was funny, but now this isn't just funny, it's actually like, it feels like a proper game as well, if you know what I mean. Right. So,
oh no, definitely, we feel the same way.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, we're making a real game now, cool.
Wow, no way.
Yeah.
Excellent.